Welcome to Washington in Focus. I am Jeremy Lott. Joining me today is the Center Square's State House reporter, Brett Davis. Brett, we're talking about the Blake decision. We'll enlighten people about that, but the story is titled "Bill Making Drug Possession a Misdemeanor Passes Out of House Executive Session." Isn't it already a misdemeanor?
Yes. Not for very long, apparently. So the House, and this is a really long-winded committee title, the House Community Safety, Justice, and Reentry Committee, they went ahead and gave a due pass recommendation to legislation that would reclassify possession of a controlled substance as a misdemeanor rather than a gross misdemeanor. You may be asking yourself, what's the difference between a gross misdemeanor and a regular old misdemeanor? So a misdemeanor, it would be the lesser charge, is punishable by up to 90 days in jail and a fine of up to $1,000. Whereas a gross misdemeanor is up to 364 days in jail and a fine of up to $5,000. This was the result basically of a Stryker amendment, which is basically when you remove everything after the title of the bill and replace it with a whole new bill. So that's the version that the House committee passed, which is going to cause some problems because you did a story on this earlier this month. The Senate passed legislation that would make possession a gross misdemeanor. So there's some conflict between these two pieces of legislation that will have to be, showing up.
So if we can back up, the Blake decision, it's very technical, but it said that the law as written is unconstitutional, and it thus made the simple possession of basically every drug no longer an offense at the state level.
Right. This goes back to it's a Supreme Court decision from 2021.
The Washington State Supreme Court.
They basically struck down the statute that made possession of controlled substances a Class C felony. And for people wanting to know what that is, that's punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. So basically, they removed any criminal penalties for possession.
Yeah, and then the legislature said, crap. And so what they did is they said, well, we're going to have it to be, it'll be a misdemeanor, and so there'll be some penalties, but we need to really think this through and figure out what we're doing. And so they set it to sunset in July 1st of this year.
So they're on the clock. They have to fix this problem before July 1. It was interesting during the meeting that somebody did bring up an amendment. Dan Griffey, he's the ranking minority member on the committee. He introduced an amendment to reclassify possession as a gross misdemeanor, but it got voted down.
The Senate, they had a floor fight about this, and the basic deal in the Senate was that. The Republicans had to join with the Democrats in order to, the ones that were still willing to back this in order to pass it. But there was two parts of the deal. One is, it's a permanent law, but also that it's a gross misdemeanor rather than just a misdemeanor, because the Republicans said that this needs to have teeth. And the reason, the other half of it was there's a lot of things that enhances like tax breaks and things like that for treatment, because they want to basically be able to force people who are caught in possession of drugs into treatment in order to scrub this from their record. That was the deal. That was the bargain that was struck in the Senate, and that the House has just unraveled.
I have actually no idea where this bill is going to end up. It seems like they're ping-ponging back and forth between gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor. Your guess is as good as mine. The Governor Inslee spoke about this a little bit at his press conference yesterday. Somebody asked him a question about that and about the legislation. And he said there needed to be some sort of sanction to get, people help who won't otherwise get help.
Governor Inslee striking the Republican position on this one.
Who would have thought?
Well, it's actually interesting that this is not often remembered, but Inslee originally, when he was running for governor, he was running at the same time that the drug legalization or the marijuana legalization was on the ballot, and he was against it.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about that.
Times change, I guess. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Brett Davis, this is Jeremy Lott. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.
Freedom and liberty are important to all of us. If you're looking for civil, intellectual conversations with those shaping the future of freedom, try the Future of Freedom podcast with me, Scott Bertram. We speak with leaders across the country in the greater conservative and libertarian movements. In-depth conversations about where the next intellectual battles will happen across the country. It's the Future of Freedom podcast. Find it at americastalking.com or wherever you get your podcasts.